There is a silence that speaks louder than any defense, and yet few people ever learn to hear it. The world trains us to respond, to prove, to correct, to debate. We grow up believing that truth must be defended with words, that wisdom must be wrapped in arguments, that silence is weakness. But deep beneath the noise, something ancient knows better. The one who rushes to argue has already been defeated, not by the other person, but by their own unrest. Arguing is rarely about truth. It is a cry for validation disguised as logic. It begins with a subtle tremor inside. The fear of being misunderstood, the sting of not being seen, the desperate need to reassert control. When that tremor grows too loud to bear, it escapes through the mouth in the form of words meant to conquer. But every word thrown in defense of the ego erodes a fragment of inner peace. There is a strange illusion at play in the human mind, the belief that peace can be restored by making someone else wrong. This illusion is seductive because it offers a temporary sense of power. The pulse quickens, the voice sharpens, and for a moment one feels alive, righteous, certain. Yet once the argument ends, no matter who won, a hollow taste lingers. That taste is the soul, reminding you that peace was traded for triumph. Alan Watts often spoke of the futility of trying to grasp water with a clenched fist. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. Arguments work the same way. The harder you try to capture truth by force, the more it escapes. Truth cannot be possessed. It can only be aligned with an alignment never happens through tension. Behind every argument lives a hidden anxiety, the fear that without words we might dissolve, that without winning we might vanish. So we talk louder, argue longer, sharpen our logic until it cuts even ourselves. But beneath that noise, the deeper self watches patiently, waiting for us to remember, peace is not something you earn by proving others wrong. It is something you return to when you stop fighting. When a person argues, what they truly reveal is their distance from stillness. You can hear it in the trembling tone, the rushed breathing, the eyes that flicker, not with clarity but with agitation. They are not defending truth. They are defending identity. And identity, when threatened, becomes desperate. It clings to opinion as if it were oxygen. It fears silence because silence dissolves the illusion of separateness. Watts' insight pierces through that illusion. To argue is to forget who you are. The moment you engage in battle over being right, you abandon the spacious awareness that knows no need to win. You descend into the narrow corridors of the mind, where words clash like swords and nobody ever leaves unscarred. The one who argues has already lost, because the battle itself is proof of disconnection from the self that does not need to fight. There is a vast difference between speaking truth and arguing for it. Speaking truth is effortless. It flows like a river, needing no resistance to define its course. Arguing, however, is the dam that blocks that river, forcing truth into a struggle it never asked for. The wise do not argue because they have nothing to prove. Not because they are indifferent, but because they understand that real clarity doesn't demand defense. Silence, when grounded in awareness, is not submission, it is mastery. It is the quiet recognition that storms cannot disturb the sky. When one rests in that recognition, words lose their urgency. You respond not to be right, but to illuminate. You listen not to reply, but to understand. The argument dissolves because its fuel, the need to be superior, has been burned away. And yet modern culture glorifies debate. We confuse sharpness for intelligence, confidence for wisdom, noise for truth. Social media thrives on conflict. The loudest voices dominate while the calmest are drowned out. But if you look closely, those who constantly need to prove themselves are never at ease. Their validation depends on attention, and attention is the most fragile currency of all. When it fades, they crumble. That is the cost of arguing as a way of being. The true warrior of consciousness does not draw their sword at every challenge. They know that every argument is a test, not of intellect, but of inner stillness. The question is never, can I prove them wrong? But can I remain centered when my ego burns to respond? Most cannot. They confuse reaction with strength and silence with defeat. But silence is not defeat. It is the sound of wisdom choosing not to waste itself. There is profound power in the pause that precedes a response. In that space, something shifts. The mind that wanted to attack begins to see the other not as an opponent, but as a mirror. Every argument is a reflection of an internal conflict waiting to be seen. The person you want to silence often represents a part of yourself you have not yet made peace with. That is why their words sting. They awaken the unresolved. To lose the inner battle is to forget this, to let the ego speak louder than awareness, to chase victory at the expense of harmony. But the good news is that this battle can be reversed at any moment. One breath, one act of noticing, one step back from the urge to prove, and the entire battlefield dissolves. You realize there was never an enemy at all, only two fragments of the same consciousness shouting across an illusion. So the question becomes, what happens when you no longer need to argue? The world softens. People's words lose their power to wound. You stop defending yourself because there is nothing left to defend. You realize that every opinion is just a wave, rising, falling, disappearing back into the sea. Truth remains, untouched by noise. To live this way is not passivity, it is clarity. It means choosing peace not out of weakness, but out of strength, so complete it no longer fears misunderstanding. The world may still provoke, opinions may still collide, but within you there is only stillness, the quiet knowing that everything resolves itself when the need to win dissolves. That is the secret Alan Watts was pointing to. The one who argues has already lost, because they have mistaken noise for power. The real victory lies in remembering that silence does not need to prove itself. It simply is. The ocean does not argue with the storm, it absorbs it and remains. And perhaps at the heart of every human conflict, that is what we are all yearning to return to, the still ocean beneath the waves, the awareness untouched by the quarrels of the surface. To hear that silence again is to rediscover peace, not as a concept, but as the quiet pulse of existence itself. There is a moment, subtle, nearly invisible, when the argument begins not with words, but with energy. Something tightens in the chest. The breath shortens. A thought rises. I must make them understand. And from that moment, peace is gone. What follows is not communication, but combat disguised as conversation. To understand why the one who argues loses the inner battle, we must look beneath the surface, not at the dialogue, but at the state that creates it. The urge to argue is not born of clarity, it is born of fragmentation. When you are whole inside, disagreement does not threaten you. You can listen even to what opposes you without trembling. But when you are divided, when some part of you doubts itself, every differing voice feels like an attack. The ego leaps to defend the illusion of stability. Words become weapons. The battlefield, however, is never outside. It is always within. Every argument begins as a quiet insecurity. It grows like fire. The more attention you give it, the hungrier it becomes. You feed it with justification, you breathe it with judgment, until it consumes both truth and connection. And when it is done, only ashes remain, the ashes of peace, of understanding, of love. The one who stays calm during conflict is not avoiding the fire. They have learned to be the air that allows the flame to burn out naturally. They trust that not every spark needs an answer. They do not suppress emotion. They transcend the need to prove it. Sometimes silence hurts because it feels like surrender, but it is not. It is the discipline of the spirit refusing to trade serenity for noise. The silence that follows restraint is not empty, it is full of power. It says, I am not here to win, I am here to understand. This understanding is rare because the world does not teach it. We are conditioned to fight for attention, to equate silence with invisibility. Yet paradoxically, those who master silence become unforgettable. They radiate a quiet authority that no argument can imitate. The great paradox is that when you stop arguing, people begin to listen. Your energy shifts from resistance to presence. You stop pushing truth outward and begin to embody it. Presence does what words cannot. It communicates directly with the nervous system of those around you. The one who remains calm disarms conflict by refusing to feed it. Consider how nature resolves friction. The river does not argue with the rock. It flows around it, slowly shaping it, transforming resistance into art. Likewise, a conscious being does not push against opposition. They flow through it, knowing that time and truth will do their work. But this flow requires trust. Trust that you are not diminished by misunderstanding, that truth does not depend on approval. Most arguments are born from this lack of trust. We seek confirmation that our perspective matters. When it is denied, we panic. Yet the need to be confirmed is the mind's confession that it has forgotten its own source. When awareness is rooted in being, external agreement becomes irrelevant. You no longer need the world to echo your truth. Your peace is its. Watch those who argue often. Their energy is brittle. Their victories leave them emptier each time. They win points, not peace. They gain applause, not wisdom. The louder the argument, the quieter their heart. And then watch the one who listens. Their silence expands the room. They speak little, but their words land like stones in water, creating ripples that last far beyond the noise. That is power without aggression, truth without tension. In every moment of conflict there is a choice. You can feed the fire, or you can hold space for it to burn itself out. One leads to exhaustion, the other to evolution. The difference lies not in the topic, but in your state of being. To live without argument does not mean to agree with everything. It means to engage without losing presence. It means to speak without the tremor of ego, to express without needing to dominate. This is not repression, it is mastery. The one who argues has lost the inner battle, because they have allowed external turbulence to dictate their inner weather. But the one who observes, breathes, and answers only when the heart is steady, that one has already won, regardless of the outcome. You will know you are free when silence feels stronger than the urge to explain. You will know you are awake when disagreement no longer threatens your sense of self. There is nothing to defend once you realize you are not a position, not a point of view, not a concept to be proven. You are the awareness that holds all positions, all points of view, all concepts, the open sky through which every storm passes. To remember this is to reclaim the battle before it begins. For when the mind tries to fight, awareness simply watches, smiling. It knows that the argument is not the enemy. It is the teacher, reminding you of where peace still trembles. Every time you choose stillness over reaction, you close the distance between who you are and what you know. And that, perhaps, is the quiet revolution Alan Watts was pointing toward, the liberation that begins not by winning debates, but by ending the need for them. At the end of every argument, when the echoes fade and the adrenaline dissolves, something tender remains, the realization that nothing was ever gained. Words may have been sharp, logic flawless, but the silence that follows always asks the same quiet question: was peace worth the trade? The inner battle Watts spoke of is not a moral failure. It is a moment of forgetting. Forgetting that the mind's need to be right is never about truth. It is about survival. When the ego argues, it is trying to prove that it exists. But the self that needs proof can never rest. It lives on the fragile edge of validation, always seeking another debate to postpone the stillness that would expose its emptiness. To see this clearly is to awaken, not in a grand mystical sense, but in the simplest of ways, by recognizing that there is no winning against another consciousness. There is only remembering that both sides are fragments of one awareness pretending to disagree. When you grasp this, the urge to argue dissolves naturally. You stop defending yourself because there is no self separate from the whole. You can express, you can disagree, but you no longer need the final word. Every conversation becomes an exploration, not a contest. And when you speak, your words carry peace because they arise from it. Inner mastery is not about silence alone. It is about choosing silence from a place of strength. It is knowing that you could argue, you could overpower, you could win, but you no longer find nourishment in that victory. The sweetness of peace has replaced the bitterness of conquest. Some will mistake your calm for weakness. Let them. Their misunderstanding is part of their own battle, not yours. The one who has found peace no longer requires witnesses. Truth validates itself. Stillness is its own defense. There comes a point where you realize that silence is not passive, it is radiant. It does not withdraw. It contains, like the ocean holding the storm without losing its depth. The awakened mind holds conflict without being disturbed. This is not detachment, it is transcendence. It is presence so vast that no argument can define or diminish it. In this presence, words regain their purity. They are no longer tools of control, but extensions of understanding. You can say, "I see your point," without fear of disappearing. You can say, "I disagree," without needing to win. You can listen fully, even to anger, without catching fire yourself. That is what it means to have won the inner battle. Watts often spoke of the futility of grasping, how the tighter we cling, the more life slips away. The same applies to opinions, identities, beliefs. The tighter you hold them, the more they define you. The looser your grip, the freer you become. To let go of argument is not to lose passion. It is to liberate passion from fear. When you stop arguing, your energy shifts from defense to creation. The same fire that once fueled debate begins to illuminate. You find yourself drawn not to prove, but to understand, not to conquer, but to connect. The very act of listening becomes sacred. It is no longer an exchange of ideas, but a meeting of souls. The world today hungers for this kind of presence. It has enough cleverness, enough rhetoric, enough noise. What it lacks is stillness. The person who can stay centered amid chaos is no longer a participant in conflict. They are the medicine for it. Their silence does not avoid confrontation. It transforms it. This transformation is not dramatic. It happens quietly, in ordinary moments when you choose to breathe instead of react, when you feel the pull of anger and simply notice it instead of obeying it. Each of these small acts of awareness rewires the old instinct to fight. Slowly you begin to see that peace was never something to achieve. It was the natural state that remained when the noise stopped. And so the one who argues has lost, but only temporarily. For every loss in awareness is an invitation to return. The defeat is not final, it is a doorway. Through that doorway, the ego's shouting fades, and what remains is the spacious, gentle hum of existence itself, unprovoked, unshaken, whole. When you step into that awareness, communication transforms. You no longer speak to convince, you speak to awaken. Your words carry the weight of silence behind them. Even disagreement becomes graceful, because it is no longer about separation, it is about exploration within unity. There is a deep humility in this state, a recognition that truth does not belong to anyone. It moves through whoever is quiet enough to let it pass. Arguing stops it. Surrender lets it flow. The one who listens with an open heart becomes its vessel. And in that vessel, the noise of the world loses its authority. The news, the opinions, the endless debates, they pass like clouds. You watch them drift, knowing the sky was never in danger. You learn to rest even while the world storms around you. This is not escapism, it is freedom. The final understanding is simple. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the absence of resistance to it. When you meet opposition without the urge to conquer, you discover that life does not demand defense, it only asks for awareness. And so, when the next argument calls your name, remember silence is not the retreat of the weak, it is the victory of the wise. It says, "I have nothing to protect, because I am already whole." The inner battle ends not when you silence others, but when you silence the restless voice within that keeps asking to be right. For in that silence, you will hear something deeper than truth. You will hear peace itself, speaking softly through the calm. And then, like Watts once implied, you will understand the paradox at the heart of existence, that nothing real is ever threatened, and nothing unreal can be defended. The one who argues has already lost, not because they were wrong, but because they forgot they were already free. And in remembering that freedom, the game of right and wrong dissolves into the quiet laughter of the soul, returning once more to what it always was, the sky beyond all storms, untouched, infinite and still.